The Median Kingdom, which lasted just over a century, holds a unique place in the history of the ancient world. It emerged on the fringes of the mighty Assyrian Empire, only to become its chief undertaker and bring an end to Mesopotamia's centuries-long hegemony. As the first great Iranian empire, Media established a political and cultural precedent that its direct successors, the Persians, would inherit and elevate to a global scale. The history of Media is the tale of a transformation from scattered tribes into an imperial power, one that must be reconstructed through the accounts of its neighbors and enemies, for the Medes themselves left behind no written records. At the turn of the 2nd and 1st millennia BCE, new tribes arrived on the Iranian plateau from the north, likely from the steppes of Central Asia. These were Indo-Iranian peoples, among whom were those remembered by history as the Medes. They settled in the northwestern part of present-day Iran, in the mountainous region of Zagros, which was already home to indigenous peoples such as the Gutians, the Lullaby, and the Kassites. The newcomers gradually intermingled with the local population, adopting and adapting its culture. The Medes first appear on the historical stage in the 9th century BCE in the annals of the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III. Over the next 2 centuries, Assyrian sources portray a land fractured into a patchwork of political entities. At that time, Media was a mosaic of dozens of small principalities, each ruled independently by local chieftains. The Assyrians referred to these rulers as Bel Ali, which can be translated as Lord of the Settlement. In the inscriptions of King Sargon II alone, more than 50 such Median chieftains are mentioned. For the Neo-Assyrian Empire, then at the height of its power, these scattered mountain principalities were targets for plundering raids. Assyrian policy toward Media did not aim at full conquest and integration. Instead, the Assyrians launched regular punitive expeditions intended to devastate the land, take captives, and impose heavy tribute. Of particular value to the Assyrians were Median horses, renowned for their combat qualities and essential to maintaining the strength of the Assyrian army. Reliefs from Assyrian palaces often depict Median tributaries leading magnificent stallions to the king's throne. Despite the brutality of these campaigns, the Assyrians never succeeded in establishing full control over the entire territory of Media. This constant external pressure, however, had unforeseen consequences for Assyria. The unrelenting threat from a common enemy became a powerful catalyst that drove the scattered Median tribes toward unification. In seeking to weaken Media, Assyria itself was laying the groundwork for the emergence of a power that would ultimately bring about its destruction. The question of how exactly the Median tribes came to be united is one of the most complex in the study of their history, owing to the fundamental discrepancies between the Greek tradition and the evidence found in cuneiform sources. The most well-known and coherent version of events was presented in the 5th century BCE by the Greek historian Herodotus. According to his account, after the Medes overthrew the Assyrian yoke, lawlessness reigned in their lands. At that time, a wise and just man named Deliochus emerged among them. Having gained a reputation as an incorruptible judge, he deliberately stopped settling disputes, which provoked such chaos that the Medes voluntarily chose him as their king so that he could restore order once and for all. Upon becoming monarch, Deioces united all the tribes, founded the magnificent capital of Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan, and introduced a strict court ceremonial, distancing himself from the people and strengthening central authority. Herodotus attributes to Deioces a reign of 53 years, ending around 647 BCE. Contemporary Assyrian texts paint a completely different picture. They do mention a man with a similar name, Diuku. However, he is not portrayed as a great unifying king, but merely as a minor ruler of one of the regions. What's more, he appears not as a liberator from Assyrian oppression, but as a participant in local intrigues. In 715 BCE, he was defeated by the Assyrian king Sargon II, taken captive and exiled to Syria along with his family. Cuneiform sources contain no evidence of a unified Median kingdom during this period. The region remained politically fragmented. Such a stark contradiction leads most modern scholars to regard Herodotus's account not as a historical record, but rather as a political myth about the origins of the state. This elegant tale of monarchy born from a desire for justice likely reflects the ideology of the later Persian Achaemenid Empire. Having inherited power from the Medes, the Persians had a vested interest in portraying the entire Iranian imperial tradition as founded on law and order, in contrast to the tyrannical rule of the Assyrians. In reality, the unification of Media was probably not a peaceful election, but a long and tumultuous process of conquest and subjugation, carried out by one of the subsequent rulers. The true founder of the Median Empire was King Xerxes, who reigned from approximately 625 to 585 BC. It was his leadership that transformed Media into a dominant power in the ancient Near East. Xerxes inherited the throne after his father, Phraates, was killed in an unsuccessful war against Assyria, according to Herodotus. The early years of his reign were devoted to consolidating power within the country. He put an end to the dominance of the Scythian tribes, who had surged in from the Asian steppes and ruled the region for nearly 3 decades. Cyaxares not only completed the expulsion of the Scythians, but also used their lingering threat to reinforce discipline and combat readiness within the Median army. His most significant innovation was a military reform. He transformed the disorganized tribal militia into a regular army divided by branch of service, into spearmen, archers, and cavalry. Thus began Media's emergence as an active player in regional politics. Having built a powerful army, Cyaxares waited for the right moment to strike against Assyria. After the death of the last great Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal, the empire was plunged into a maelstrom of civil wars and rebellions. Seizing the opportunity, Xerxes forged a strategic alliance with the Babylonian king Nabopolassar, who had launched an uprising. In 614 BCE, the Median forces captured and sacked Ashur, the ancient sacred capital of Assyria. Then in 612 BCE, the combined Median-Babylonian army stormed Nineveh, the largest city in the world at the time, after a 3-month siege. The fall of Nineveh marked the end of the Assyrian Empire, which had terrorized its neighbors for centuries. Shortly after the fall of Assyria, the Medes launched a campaign against the kingdom of Urartu to eliminate a potential rival. During this campaign, key fortresses were seized, centers of Urartian power were destroyed, and the administrative system was disrupted. By the mid-6th century BCE, weakened by external attacks and internal decline, Urartu had lost its independence for good and was absorbed into the Median Empire. The fall of Assyria reshaped the world order. The Medes and the Babylonians divided its legacy, and Media began expanding westward into the heart of Asia Minor. This brought it into conflict with another powerful regional power, the Lydian kingdom, ruled by King Alyattes. A protracted 5-year war began, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The turning point came in 585 BCE during yet another battle. In the heat of combat, a total solar eclipse occurred, an event the Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus, according to Herodotus, had predicted. The sudden darkness was perceived by both armies as a terrifying omen from the gods. The warriors ceased fighting and laid down their arms. Through the mediation of the kings of Babylon and Cilicia, a peace treaty was concluded. The river Halis, modern-day Kızılırmak in Turkey, was recognized as the boundary between the two powers, and the peace was sealed with a dynastic marriage. Xerxes' son Astyages wed Alyattes' daughter Erinus. This event solidified the new balance of power that had emerged in the region following the fall of Assyria. The heyday of the Median Empire proved to be short-lived. The fate of the state was sealed during the reign of its last king. Astyages, the son of Cyaxares, ruled from 585 to 550 BCE. His reign appears to have been a time of peace and stability. Yet it was during his rule that his vassal in the south of Iran, Cyrus II, the Persian king from the city of Anshan in the region of Pars, began to rise in power, entering history as Cyrus the Great. By this time, a fairly powerful opposition faction of the nobility had emerged in Media, led by a certain Harpagus. Dissatisfied with their king's policies, they began searching for potential allies and turned their attention to Cyrus, urging him to join their cause. The Persian king, in turn, easily persuaded his tribesmen to rise up against the Medes. First, he sent them off to perform hard labor, and the next day he threw them a feast, after which he offered them a choice: toil under the rule of the Median king, or overthrow him and enjoy an easy life. Clearly, the Persians had long chafed under Median supremacy, so their answer was hardly a surprise. Since the Median camp was divided, the Persians won with relative ease. In the first battle, Astyages appointed Harpagus as commander, and it ended almost as soon as it began. Harpagus had already openly sided with Cyrus, bringing his troops over to join the Persian army. Having lost his best forces without a fight, Astyages gathered everyone he could for the next battle, including the elderly. Behind the main force, he even stationed a barrier detachment tasked with killing anyone who tried to flee the battlefield. The decisive battle near Pasargadae lasted 2 days. According to legend, the Persians were on the verge of surrender under the Medes' onslaught, but were shamed by their wives and found the strength to turn the tide. The rebellion ended in 550 BCE. Over the next 2 years, all the territories that had belonged to the Median kingdom also submitted to the Persians. After capturing Astyages, Cyrus not only spared his life, but even appointed him governor of Hyrcania. A portion of the Median nobility that had sided with the Persians retained their privileges. The newly formed state preserved the Median system of governance, and since Cyrus's father, Cambyses, had married Astyages' daughter, Cyrus himself was the deposed king's grandson, and therefore was not even considered a usurper. It was in essence a change of ruling dynasty within a unified imperial structure of Iran. The Persians did not destroy the Median state, they inherited it. In the eyes of the outside world, such as the Greeks, the new power was long regarded as a joint kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. Even the wars with the Persians, launched later under Darius I, were still referred to by the Greeks as the Median Wars. The idea of restoring an independent Media still lingered in the air for some time. In 522 BCE, a Median uprising against the Persians broke out. It was led by a member of the old royal dynasty named Phraates, who declared himself king. For a brief moment, the rebels managed to restore Median rule over a substantial part of their former lands. However, the Persian king Darius I brutally crushed the revolt. The pretender Phraates was executed in Ecbatana, and after that, no more was heard of an independent Media. The history of the Median kingdom is a vivid example of how, under the pressure of external threats, disparate tribes managed to consolidate and form a powerful state. Although their own empire was short-lived, its significance was profound. Media established the first Iranian imperial model, which was later adopted and expanded to unprecedented proportions by the Achaemenids, becoming a bridge between the ancient Semitic civilizations of Mesopotamia and a new era of Iranian dominance.